Hey, everybody, it's Ryan. Thanks for downloading today's show. And just a reminder, as always, Wake Up War Chant is brought to you by our friends at For the Table, Madison Social, Central and Township, in the heart of College Town. Tallahassee to Thomasville, and from coast to Atlantic coast, it's time to Wake Up War Chant here on 97.9 ESPN Radio, and it is a very happy Tuesday morning to you and yours. You're currently listening to the voice of Ryan Kelly. I'm the director of digital media on warchant.com. Good to talk with you here on November the 14th. Drew Hickens on the other side of the glass. He's pushing buttons. He's making things work, as he always does. Drew, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm all right. Sorry for the little bit of delay there. I did not realize that my headphones were not turned up. So it is what it is. But once again, thanks so much for waking up with us here at 6 a.m. on 97.9 ESPN Radio, and, of course, the TuneIn Radio app, the WTSM app, all those different places that you can stream on your mobile device. The podcast, you can find it just about anywhere. iTunes, Podcast Republic, warchantradio.com, even YouTube. And no matter where it is, we thank you for rating and subscribing. If you like the show, it helps us, and it helps you. Of course, if you want to get in contact with us, radio at warchant.com. Comments, questions, analysis, they all go right there. And, of course, Wake Up War Chant's your Twitter handle as well. Pretty fun Renegade Express coming up this week because I've got some fun questions, some football-related, some not. And on top of all that, I got a question yesterday via email about the quarterback situation that I think a lot of people have been asking and rumbling for quite some time. But we really haven't given a big discussion to it on the show. So we'll get into that in a little bit. And of course, you know, we can't do this without our friends at Madison Social, Central, Township, Soto Bacon Company. They make up For the Table. They're all in the heart of College Town, except, of course, Soto, which is in the heart of Midtown. Florida State, Delaware State is not exactly the greatest game to have talking points about. But for as bad as this season has been, it makes for fascinating talk radio at certain points of the year. So I thought today we would kick off the show before we get to Ira Schoffel, who's going to join us in the next segment, and before we talk a smidge of hoops to close the show. I thought it would be fun to talk about the non-negotiables of Florida State's 2017 season. You can frame it however you want, you can say whatever you want, and you can talk about the future however you want. But these are the three absolute non-negotiables of this season. There's some things you don't want to say in life, and there's some things you don't want to do in life. But you know they're absolutely necessary to the way you live your life in 2017. I am happily employed by warchant.com. I am happily employed by WCTV. I don't really have any interest at the moment in going anywhere else. But I know that in today's world, I have to have a LinkedIn page and a LinkedIn account. I have to stay with those annoying notifications and those stupid emails. I have to adapt to something even if I don't want to. And I think the first non-negotiable here is really, really obvious. No matter what happens at the end of this season, Florida State could win all three games, go to a bowl, they could play a decent team having a down year like them, and just pulverize them to smithereens. No matter what happens, the first non-negotiable of this season is all about the future. Florida State has to make changes on the coaching staff. I know it's the most obvious one. It's one that's been alluded to for 2 months now. But this season has taught you one thing, and that's that the little things over the course of the last couple of years, the little bit of we're not blowing out opponents we should blow out. We play to the level of our competition. Sometimes our defense isn't great on third down. Sometimes situationally we're not the best football team. The little things that have built up over the years and over the years and over the years, probably since 2014, have finally come home to roost at Florida State. And it's finally all built up into one big thing, and that's a culture problem to an extent. And that culture, that idea that when you're in a game late, when the other team has the ball, when there's that idea that, oh gosh, we could win or lose, It almost seems like it's a default setting in the culture of this team that, well, here we go again. We're probably going to lose.
Well, I mean, other than the fact that Miami's rolling right now, Florida's also going after another coach here. We don't know who they're going to hire yet. There's a lot of rumblings about who it's going to be. We'll have to wait and see. But assuming that they get this thing right, because they've whiffed the last 2 times, and they are Florida, so you don't really expect them to continue to keep being bad, because there is no world where Florida State just gets to destroy Miami and Florida every year. Sooner or later, all 3 of us are going to be good, and that's what's best for college football. It's unfortunate because I enjoy beating up on them. However, it's just not how things go. But the way that Miami's going and the way that Florida will more than likely go with some new energy with a new coach, these coaching hires for Jimbo Fisher are a big, big deal, and they have a lot to do with his future in Tallahassee. Now, I've said before that Jimbo Fisher's probably not going anywhere as far as, the Texas A&M rumors and whatnot. He's definitely not getting fired. However, if you want to look long-term of Jimbo Fisher in Tallahassee, this is going to be the career-defining offseason for him. I truly believe that, because I don't think Florida State has a real problem yet as far as what this season has done to the overall program. However, I think that this could be the start of a snowball if you don't get it under control and get the right coaches in place, because, listen, you're going to take a little bit of a hit in recruiting this year. Miami is going to have a top 5 class. I'm not sure how Florida will end up shaping out, but that's besides the point. And that you just, best case scenario, you go 7-6 if you win a bowl game this year. I think that's probably being super generous, assuming that we more than likely lose the bowl game. Florida State really just needs to get things back on track, because they still have a very talented roster. So that if they're able to nip this thing in the butt and show that it was just a one-season outlier and get the right coaches in there, kind of like how you saw with Brian Kelly at Notre Dame, where they had that terrible year last year. He makes the right hires, and all of a sudden they're humming again. I think that's a really big deal, just for not only the team next year, but for Jimbo Fisher's overall career in Tallahassee.
Notre Dame sometimes gets the luxury of recruiting outside of its own state and not having to war. I mean, because there's only so many talented football prospects in Indiana. There's a lot in Ohio and there's a lot in Pennsylvania, so they have to go outward. And for the in-state kids that are good, they have to compete against the Indiana Hoosiers and Purdue. Ooh, I'm shaking. Florida State has to compete with Florida and Miami, and even to a certain extent, Central, South, International, and Atlantic, for the recruits in one of the most talent-rich states, if not the most talent-rich state in Florida. Or excuse me, in the nation. I would hope Florida's the most talent-rich state in Florida. But that being said, when you look at all of this, Florida State has a situation on its hands very, very similar to what it took advantage of in 2010. And that was Randy Shannon gets fired at Miami. Urban Meyer gets fired /retired /health reasons at Florida. And there was complete uncertainty at the other 2 programs. Jimbo Fisher takes advantage of those. He beats them both in his first year, and he beats them resoundingly. He uses that as a snowball to get recruiting going. And the state literally has not been the same since. It's literally been Florida State's show for the last 8 years. Florida's beaten Florida State 1 time in that stretch. Miami has beaten Florida State 1 time in that stretch. And now you sit at an opportunity and an occasion for the Miami Hurricanes, where they sit and they have a chance to pounce and attack, facilities or no facilities, on-campus stadium, no on-campus stadium. Mark Richt can straight recruit. He's going to get those kids to Miami, while Florida and Florida State are fumbling to get staffs together. You have to have a decent enough class. You have to get back on track next year and beat Miami and beat Florida, because if not, that shift could have already happened.
Especially because that the negative recruiting is going on and going on strong with the other 2 teams. You just know that that's how Miami's getting to a lot of these kids. There's already some kids that Florida State has committed in this class who are potential flips to Miami. It's something to be concerned about. But like I said, as long as you get things under control here quickly, things will be all right. But however, this is how things start. College football is so cyclical. It's something like an unlucky season like Florida State has had this year, where it's been this perfect culmination of all these bad factors with the Alabama game and the Francois injury and then the Irma layoff and James Blackman kind of regressing because he's an 18-year-old kid and being thrown into the fire of this season and blowing 3 close games. This is how things can get out of control, and that's why I think those coaching hires are going to be so important.
Time for the obvious, like even more obvious than the last one. Non-negotiable of the 2017 season. If Florida State does not get to a bowl and win, this isn't subjectively, it's objectively, and I still can't believe I'm saying this, and I debated putting this in there, and I guess the only reason I wanted to still put this in here as one of the non-negotiables we talk about is because it's still so crazy for me to wrap my brain around. If you don't win the next 3 and then possibly the next 4, this is objectively the worst season of Florida State football in the modern era. And after living through a thing that literally an entire fan base calls the lost decade, that is so crazy to wrap your head around. Absolutely insane. Florida State went to the Emerald Nuts Bowl to play a terrible UCLA team in 2006. Florida State lost to Kentucky in 2007. Granted, half the team was suspended, but Kentucky, they were shut out by Wake Forest 30-0. All of that happened within a span of 2 years. And you can objectively say if they don't win the next 3 and take care of business in the bowl, at least record-wise, and record-wise, that streak is what matters, this is objectively the worst seasons of the modern era. That's incredible to think if you don't take care of business in the next month.
Yeah, I mean, maybe the worst outcomes. This team has been far more competitive at times than I think those past teams have
Absolutely.
been. I don't think that any of those teams could have put up fights at Clemson or against apparently number what did Miami end up being last night? Does it come out last night or is it
They
tonight?
come out tonight, but the AP has them at number 2.
Okay, so we're assuming they're a top 2 or 3 team.
They're in the playoff tonight. I'll know that much.
Yeah, absolutely. And Florida State's been able to do things like that this year. Granted, there's the outliers of almost that Wake Forest-esque performance at Boston College, but at least that was at Boston College and not getting shut out at home.
And that was a far better Wake team than a Boston College
That's
team.
right, because I think that Wake team went on to win the ACC that year.
They did. They would go on to play in the Orange Bowl.
So yeah, it's tough. I mean, it's pretty surprising just given where Florida State started this year, and you kind of went and we all had this feeling when Francois went down that it was we were gonna have a tough year, but we went through the schedule, and you said I thought maybe 8-3 worst case. Not worst case. I think 7-4 was worst case in a lot of people's mind. You'd say 8-3, but there just wasn't losses that you could pick for Florida State to have. But you knew that they would be out there with the true freshman quarterback. But it's really confusing to me how I know they've been banged up at receiver and things like that, but it's just confusing how Francois is just. You shouldn't lose one player and your entire team just implode. That defense is still virtually fully intact. You have lost a couple of wide receivers here and there, but if you were supposed to be as elite as you were, there's no reason for Florida State to be 3-6 here. Now they've had some really bad luck, obviously, but it really does beg the question of when you brought up culture, what exactly is going on here when one player can really you think in your head if Florida State has Francois this year, they're what, 7-2, 6-3 worst case. But the thing is, if Florida State was 6-3 at full strength this year when people thought that they had a chance to compete for a national title, I almost wonder if the panic would be worse because of what happened last year and everything, and people thinking that we were turning the corner and whatnot. I do wonder what the vibe around the program would be if Florida State, still at full strength, just wasn't a national title contender.
The schedule's a lot tougher than the ones that those teams in the mid-2000s played. You're absolutely right. But I think when the goal of your season, literally from about the halfway point, probably the loss to Louisville, shifted from let's have a decent year, go 8-4 with a backup quarterback to let's just keep our winning streak alive. then I think at a certain point the strength of schedule doesn't matter. It's all W's and L's at that point, because I don't care where you are in the Power Five. If you're Florida State, you should be able to find 7 W's, including a bowl game. I don't care what it is. And I think that's the one thing that if you are Florida State, the one non-negotiable that you take away at the end that really makes you happy is that this is, bar none, hands down, the easiest stretch of Florida State's schedule coming up. And that's the good news I will leave you with. I like what Doug Marrone, the head coach of the Jaguars, likes to say about schedules and how they look at the schedule there. They look at it in quarters. They split it into 4 parts. Try to win as many quarters as you can. You're good. Take a look at the quote-unquote quarters of Florida State's schedule. Alabama, NC State, Wake Forest. That's rough. Miami, Duke, Louisville. Great team. Pedestrian team. Okay team. Still not easy. Boston College, Syracuse, Clemson. Physical team on a short week. Syracuse, who kind of bought in and believed. One of the best teams in the country. Delaware State, Florida, ULM. A pushover, a team that, quite frankly, is a mirror image of you with even less offense, and ULM. If you're going to make the run, if you're going to have a part of the schedule with zero margin for error, thank God it's this one. That's all you have to say about that. And I think it does make it a little scarier, because if you do stumble here, I think you get a little bit madder than you want to get, just because this part of the schedule is so soft. And I'm not saying they're losing to Delaware State. They're not, folks. They're going to beat them by 30. I'm not saying they're losing to ULM. There's a far better chance they do that than Delaware State. I think I'm morely talking about, if you're going to save anything about this season, go to a bowl, beat Florida. It's that simple. Because when you look at Florida, I was one of those people. I was a late come around to, I don't know if Florida State can or should on the road. The way Florida's looked the last couple of weeks, I get it. They put up a fight against South Carolina, and you tip your cap to them for trying. But this team should beat Florida. This team just went toe-to-toe with Clemson. It should beat Florida.
Yeah, and if you watch that South Carolina game, yes, Florida did put up a fight, but they also, the reason why they almost even covered in that game was because Felipe Franks came in and they had a busted coverage on a long 3rd down, and he threw a ball about 60 yards in the air to Mark Thompson with nobody covering him. So it wasn't like they were sustaining drives back and forth. I mean, they're so bad. You can't lose that game. Not only can you not lose that game, but you went ahead and rescheduled the ULM game, which people outside of Florida State football can feel however they'd like to feel about it. I'm not even quite sure how I felt about it at the time. But if it gets you to your 37th, I guess it would be, straight bowl game, I think it's something you had to do. I think it's something a lot of college football programs would have done. But having said that, since you did go ahead and reschedule them, there's absolutely no way you can stumble against Florida, because God forbid you lose that game and you're playing against ULM in December on the week of the ACC championship when Miami's playing Clemson and you're playing ULM at home to get to win number 5. That will be embarrassing. It's embarrassing enough that we'll have to be playing them in December when Miami's playing for an ACC title to get to win number 6 and get to a bowl. But do not lose to Florida and have something like that happen. That's where this team's pride and resolve and heart is really going to have to show up, because these just aren't games they should lose. Delaware State, obviously, they will not lose. Florida is a game that I'll sit here and say that it's not impossible for them to lose. They could very well lose that game. But if they play the way that we all know they can play, they're the more talented team, and they shouldn't lose that football game. And if they do, it would be crazy to me to think that a Randy Shandon interim led team who struggled to do any kind of thing, who very well may lose to UAB this coming week, by the way, would beat Florida State after you just went toe to toe with Clemson, a football game you should have won, who went toe to toe with Miami, a football game you should have won, who went toe to toe with Louisville, a game that you should have won, who are all better teams, far better teams than Florida. So I think if Florida State just shows up and does what they do, granted that's not exactly the best thing that they've done all year, but if they just do enough, there's no way they should lose that game. And then obviously ULM is not a terrible team, but Florida State will not lose that game. So we'll just have to see, but really there's no way that Florida State shouldn't be going to a bowl game this year.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we could talk about this for forever, but we do got to get you caught up. There are plenty of teams in the top 25 in NCAA basketball in action last night. Let's go. It's Why You Were Sleeping.
Hello. Good morning.
Wake up! Wake up! Wake me up! Good morning. Good morning.
What happened last night?
All right, let's bounce. Minnesota 86-74 over Providence at the Dunk. Notre Dame gets it done in South Bend 88-62 over Mount St. Mary's. Florida over Gardner-Webb 116-74. Cincinnati gets the dub at home 102-51 over Western Carolina. Northwestern with a win over St. Peter's 75-66. Baylor 70-46 over Texas A&M Corpus Christi. Xavier gets the win 101-75 over Rider. Wichita State 81-63 over C of C. St. Mary's the winners over New Mexico State 92-74. And finally, Southern Cal, Andy Enfield gets the win over North Dakota State 75-65 in Los Angeles. When we come back, Ira Schoffel helps us chat a little bit on Wake Up War Chant 97.9 ESPN Radio. Welcome back to Wake Up War Chant 97.9 ESPN Radio, brought to you by your friends at For the Table, Madison Social, Central, Township, all right there in the heart of College Town. Of course, now including the Soto Banking Company in Midtown. It's time to talk to our friend, Mr. Ira Schoffel, the managing editor of warchant.com. And really, in somewhat of an extension of if you heard our postgame podcast on Saturday, I really kind of wanted to pick up there with Ira because there's so much to dig into in that Clemson game, and I think our own Ira Schoffel wrote about it very, very well and really put it into the microcosm it needs to be. So without further ado, the managing editor of warchant.com, Mr. Ira Schoffel, over the phone line. Ira, how are you, my friend?
I'm good, Ryan. How are you?
I'm all right. My favorite paragraph in your story, which, by the way, if you haven't read it, Good, Bad, and Ugly, this is the identity of Florida State football in 2017. My favorite paragraph, because it completely wraps it up, it's 5 words. This is who they are. And I think this is literally, you could watch that game over and over and over again, and you could be thrilled by it, and then you could be angered by it, and then you could think this team's great, and then you could think this team's terrible. But I think those 5 words sum it up better than anything else. This is who they are.
Yeah, it seems like, if you go back through the whole season, this is kind of what we've seen from this team is, you'll, for a drive or two, or even a quarter, or maybe even a half, they can play with anybody. I mean, that you kind of forget the Alabama game. If you go back to the Alabama, and this was when they had DeAndre Francois, that Alabama game, midway through the third quarter, I mean, it's a dogfight. I mean, Florida State in the first half looked like the better team. They played well early in the second half. But then once things started going downhill, it just snowballed. And then, of course, DeAndre got hurt late. But even before that happened, the FSU was kind of falling apart. They made the mistakes on special teams. DeAndre had the interceptions. It was the same story in some other games in Miami, Louisville, NC State, where there would be stretches where, Florida State looked really good. They looked like that team we expected to see this season. And then there are other times where it's a disaster. And that's, again, what we saw in Clemson, the first half didn't look like FSU could move the ball if they played for 10 quarters or 20 quarters. Then they come out in the second half and they kind of figure some things out, go to the air, make some plays, get back in it. Defense is making plays. They've got the ball at Clemson's 40 with a chance to tie it or go up, and first play, interception. And then the defense kind of, can't get a hold. So it's just, that game was very similar, I think, to this whole season.
You mentioned it. just those couple inches. And I think it is so ironic that Jimbo Fisher talks all season about inches, and you kind of roll your eyes at certain points about it. But this was literally a game of inches. It completely was. This is one of the few games where you can say that and you can feel completely validated. A game of inches, a game of breaks, a game of things bouncing the right way for you. And you rightfully pointed out in your article as well that the margin right now, because of how good and deep the ACC is, between being the best team in the conference and being a middling pedestrian fight for a bowl game team, is so slim right now because there are so many good players and it is so talented. But at the end of the day, you're just as talented, and by just as talented, I mean more talented than just about every single team in the conference not named Clemson. And I think that's what frustrates people, is that, is the ACC far better than what it used to be? Of course. No one's arguing that. No one's going to debate that. And as a matter of fact, I'd say most people are completely thrilled about that. But this point still remains, you're still more talented than most of those teams. You should go out and execute. But yet it's those couple plays, it's those couple problems, it's those couple differences that keep you from being where Miami is or Clemson is, and has you where you are right now. And to be fair, speaking of Miami was on the other end of this for, let's face it, about the last decade or so.
Yeah, and you look at that game again against Clemson, and just some plays that, again, show you the difference between being in the conversation for the college football playoff and being 3-6, where Florida State is. I mean, just think about how many times Clemson needed a big catch, and they got it from Hunter Renfrow or Kane, or, their guys stepped up and made big plays. Florida State's receivers, you got Nyquan Murray running wide open down the sideline. He loses the ball in the light. You've got Auden Tate pretty much wide open on a 4th and 2 pass. James Blackman throws it a little bit too far. Auden Tate can't make the catch. It seems like every time they have a chance to, make that defining play, and they did make some big plays. I mean, Brian Burns made some huge plays on defense. As a whole, I thought the defense played pretty well. But again, when the game's on the line, this team, for whatever reason, and Jimbo even said it after the game, he doesn't, there's not really, they just have to learn to make those plays at those crucial moments. And it just hasn't happened for this team. And, to your overall point, though, this isn't an FSU team that's played great all season. I mean, they've whether it's coaching, whether it's players not being disciplined, you don't walk away from FSU games this season saying, wow, they were really prepared. Wow, they really executed. Wow, that looks like a really sharp team. They just had a bad luck. For the most part, you kind of see why they don't win. And a lot of it's a true freshman QB, but a lot of it's other guys not playing to the level that they need to play. And as you said, I mean, I think that's why fans leave these games or turn off these games feeling very frustrated that this team is not playing to the level that it probably could.
You said it all, Ira, there, and that, it is just that little bit of separation. But now there is little room for separation if you're Florida State. The margin for error has gone to 0. And don't get me wrong, you're going to win this game Saturday. There's a reason we have not muttered the words Delaware State Hornets throughout this entire interview. I mean, they're 2-8. If I'm not mistaken, I don't have the notes quite in front of me, but if I'm not mistaken, when I did a little bit of research off the top in the media guides, Delaware State's leading rusher, I believe, has somewhere in the ballpark of 36 to 38 yards per game. I mean, they're not good. There's no other way around it. You could play your worst game all year and probably still win this game. And even the people who are rolling their eyes saying, you're testing fate. No, this is just kind of a stark reality type game. But even with that, I mean, one would think Florida showed that they had a pulse and they haven't completely quit on Saturday. That game's on the road. And then, of course, ULM, you're going to be on your 10th straight week of playing football, exhaustion, things of that nature. And of course, ULM, I don't know a ton about the Warhawks this year, but I know they've pushed a couple decent to okay teams over the last couple years when they've played them. So regardless, you take nothing for granted when you're 3-6 is the point I'm trying to make here. And that Delaware State, sure, you can take for granted. Don't take that Florida game for granted. Don't take ULM for granted, because you are playing for one of the most tremendous streaks in the history of college sports to survive.
Yeah, and FSU's players certainly are well aware of that, and Jimbo Fisher, his coaching staff, they're well aware of it as well. That's really what this season's about right now. I mean, they're not going to accomplish really any of the preseason goals, the things that they thought this team was capable of. But at the end of the day, if they can keep those two streaks alive, then the 40 straight seasons without a losing record, and then also 35 straight seasons with bowl appearances, it would be, again, it doesn't salvage this season. The season's still a disappointment, but at least it won't mess up the tradition. It won't mess up the legacy that Florida State football has built. And the players are, they're cognizant of that, and they want to do a good job, and they want to do that, and it's right there for them. I think that's the important thing. Like you said, they can't sleepwalk through these three games. I mean, beyond Delaware State, they can't sleepwalk through those other two games and expect to definitely win, but they're very winnable games. It's not like Florida State's got to go out and knock off a national champion contender to be bowl eligible. They just have to take care of business against three teams that they should beat. And again, for people who aren't familiar with Delaware State and they've seen FCS schools, formerly Division I AA schools, knock off big powers in the past, the Georgia Southerns or Appalachian States or whoever.
This is the team that Georgia Southern schedules as their cupcake.
Exactly. This is the bottom of the FCS barrel. So Florida State's not losing to them, but again, these other two games, and Jimbo, talked Monday about, what the goal for this game is. Then, well, it's to just keep cleaning things up, keep building habits of playing good football, because that's going to be the difference in those other two games.
Ira, let's switch gears a little bit off the gridiron to the hardwood. Florida State basketball playing their first game tonight against George Washington. It's a team they played last year, and they beat rather mercilessly on December 4th, 67-48, and it was far worse at halftime. If memory serves me correctly, Leonard Hamilton ends up calling the dogs off in that game, or it might have been worse. Listen, this is not last year's team. They're not going to be as good, but I still think they're a team that can make the tournament, be a decent kind of middle-of-the-road 7th, 8th, 9th in the ACC. So if you're a fan and you're wondering what you're getting tonight, what do you think the typical Florida State fan should keep their eye on at the Tucker Center tonight?
I think they'll still like the style of play that we saw last year. This team, the changes that the coaching staff made last year to really accentuate the scoring ability of Jonathan Isaac and Dwayne Bacon and, the XRM, and give them a chance to kind of flourish in the open court. You're going to see a lot of that again. This is a team that really loves to run up and down the floor, can make a lot of great plays in transition. I mean, there aren't many faster guards than a C.J. Walker. Trent Forrest can really run the offense in the open floor, make good passes. I think you'll see some, I think what fans have been excited about the last couple of years is, people love to see the big finishes around the basket. They like to see the alley-oops and all that kind of stuff. And this team has that potential, and I think that's what they're going to want to do. In the half court, it's probably going to be a little bit tougher. I don't know that they've got, you lose your top three scorers in Bacon, Isaac, and XRM. That's a tall task to just replace that. So I think half court's going to be a little bit of a challenge for this team. They've got some good size with Chris Kumaje and a couple other Phil Kofer and a couple other guys that they can play inside. But I think the most of the scoring you're going to see is Brian Angola in the open floor, Trent Forrest. Those guys kind of getting up and down the floor looking for easy opportunities. And then this team also, from what we've seen in the preseason, has been a lot better shooting team. And that was their downfall, of course, last year. They got in the tournament, saw that zone from Xavier, and just had no answers for it. This is a team that can shoot a lot better from the perimeter. So I think you might see some of that tonight as well.
this team isn't going to be as bully-like as they were with their athleticism a year ago, but you're right. They're going to be a lot better at shooting the ball. They're going to be a lot better at picking their spots on certain occasions, and they are going to be more equipped to face different styles of defenses and not just try to impose their will because, listen, having depth is a great thing, and having the talent that you had at the front was great last year, but let's face it, we all know Florida State was not a great jump shooting team. Dwayne Bacon was very streaky, XRM was very streaky, Terrence Mann doesn't always trust his jump shot, and John Isaac at times maybe didn't take over the game as much as he should have, considering he was the best jump shooter of those four. However, for Florida State, I feel like you're going to see a tempo very, very similar to what you saw last year. You're obviously going to see a lot of bodies go in and out still. MJ Walker is going to be a great addition to this team. He's going to be a lot of fun to watch. But I also feel like you're going to see, I guess, a team. I mean, Florida State, throughout those early Leonard Hamilton years, those tournament teams, they always had that one star. They always had the Chris Singleton or the Tony Douglas or the Al Thornton. They always had that one dude. And Florida State, I think, has some dudes who have potential to be that guy. And, of course, a lot of us think MJ Walker is going to be a one and done. But I feel like it is going to be, and I hate to use a Hamism, but this is a team that's going to win a lot of games by committee and then maybe just having that one or two guys that are going to shine on a given night, and that doesn't always mean they're going to be the same guy.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting to see how they all play together. I mean, they've got a lot of similar guys. I mean, like guys that, wing-type players that, again, like you mentioned, MJ Walker, the freshman, who was a five-star recruit. He can really shoot it. He can play on the wing. Obviously Brian Angola can score in a million different ways. He's probably the most versatile guy. But then, Forrest and Terrence Mann, those guys have really improved their jump shot. So I think they'll feel more comfortable with those guys doing that. And then the kind of the wild card, Mfiando Kabengele. I'm so bad at that. I apologize, Fee. They call him Fee, but he redshirted last year and was really the star of the preseason. He's a guy, number 25. If you go to the game, look for number 25. I mean, he's 6'9", so he can play inside, but he can really shoot the ball and has some impressive athletic ability as well. So I just think it's going to be fun to see how these guys all play together. From talking to the coaches and people around the program, they say the chemistry's been great, that these guys love playing each other, playing with each other, playing to each other. So it could be fun. I mean, as you said, this is not going to be a team with three, surefire NBA guys on it that you're going to say, okay, you know what you're going to get out of those big guys. But I think the style of play and the way they play together, I think it's going to make for a pretty fun style of basketball. It's going to come down to how they defend, because that's at the end of the day, Leonard Hamilton's teams are going to get in with defense, and that's what we have to see from this team.
We will find out tonight at the Tucker Center, and of course, plenty of coverage for that, warchant.com, and plenty of coverage for the barn burner against the Delaware State Hornets coming your way from warchant.com as well. We're going to get a chance to talk to players today, so make sure that you're sticking around with that. Ira, as always, thank you very much, my friend. It's always appreciated.
Thanks, Ryan. Take care.
A little bit more hoops chatter on the other end. It's Wake Up War Chant here on 97.9 ESPN Radio.
Darn pop-ups and video ads.
Are you wasting your time again on clickbait FSU updates that are bloated down with ads?
Yeah. And after crashing my computer, the information isn't even up to date. You're on warchant.com. What's really going on with the Seminoles?
For the real scoop, you'll need to get your own War Chant subscription.
What's it cost?
Free. There's a 30-day trial offer right now.
You know I like free. Sign me up.
Use the promo code WARCHANT30. That's WARCHANT30. Nobody has more accurate and timely information on the Noles than WARCHANT.com.
WARCHANT.com, your ultimate Seminole source.
So we mentioned FSU hoops back in action tonight, and of course that tip-off's going to be later tonight. But before then, from 4 to 7, head on over to For the Table. Enjoy happy hour before you head on over to the TLC Double C, as our friend Mr. Cameron likes to call it. That's, of course, the best happy hour in town. at 3 different places, 3 different experiences, all with the same great deal. Madison Social, Central Township. Make sure you're headed over that way. So we mentioned it. Florida State basketball tonight. George Washington, a team they beat into a paste last year, a team they'll probably beat decently soundly tonight. I would not imagine nearly as close as last year. I mean, I don't know exactly all the pieces George Washington has returning, but I do know this. George Washington's a proud enough program to where I don't imagine them being absolutely horrible for a long, long stretch of time. I will say this, though. I don't know how much you're going to learn about this team's rotation and what people see and all that, because we know by this point, over 15 years later, how Leonard Hamilton likes to treat non-conference games in which the Noles should win. And that's that he just tries to maximize minutes for everybody, keep everybody fresh enough, and keep it. And that's what I loved about last year, playing out of conference. When that team would hit the floor and they would literally make hockey-style line changes. When a set of guys have been on the floor, when 5 guys have been on the floor for 3, 4, 5 minutes, and Leonard Hamilton in a foul replaces all 5 of them wholesale. And if you're going to play games like this, and if you're going to play and try to win games with a bunch of different combinations, with 9, 10, 11 guys, I don't necessarily hate that move, because I feel like when you're switching so many people, especially with as many new faces as this team has, you've got to switch things up. You've got to mix things up and see what works outside of just scrimmaging yourself. I think that's a big deal, and I'm interested to see it because I want to see MJ Walker. I want to see Fee, who you heard Ira talk about earlier after redshirting last year. I want to see what this looks like with Terrence Mann and Trent Forrest and guys like that running the point and taking charge.
Yeah, I want to see if Terrence Mann is able to complete this trend that he's been on so far the first 2 years of his career, where he just keeps vastly improving. Because in order for him to take that next step, he does need to get better offensively. He needs to have a better jump shot. At times last year, you saw it, but he was very scared to take that shot the majority of the time. I think it's going to be interesting to see how he has to evolve in that way because of the loss of guys like Bacon and XRM and obviously Jonathan Isaac. So it's going to be interesting to see how this team gels. I don't expect obviously the same level that we saw last year, but I still think this can be a good basketball team.
And I agree with you. And I think Terrence Mann, because this team as a whole, the jump shot is getting so much better. If he wants to maximize what he can do on the floor, because there are so many guys that can play, he's got to get a better jump shot, because this is going to be a good jump shooting team, at least from what we've heard out of practice and what we've seen. He's got to lift out of that kind of one-dimensional, take it to the rack offensively, to get people to respect him taking it to the rack again. We're putting a bow on it after this. It's Wake Up War Chant. It's on 97.9, and it's on ESPN Radio. Put them on the time. Wake Up War Chant, 97.9, ESPN Radio. I'm interested. I want your thoughts on this, Drew. If you're setting an over-under for the crowd at the Tucker Center tonight, what are you setting it at?
You give me the line and I'll say over-under.
No. I don't know. That's not the question here.
That's I don't know. I mean, people might be hungry for something different the way the football season. Yeah, the way the football season.
Let's go eat a W tonight. How about that?
Oh God. I really don't know. That's a really good question.
Why don't I set it at not announced, or well, it has to be announced attendance because that's what we go off of. Announced attendance is usually for these games 6,500 is usually what I would say a non-conference game announced will be. You playing over?
I'll go a little over just because it's the opening game.
It's the opening game. I wonder if the students show. That's my big question here, because they were so good at showing up last year. Don't disappoint me this year. Mike and Mike's up next. 97.9 ESPN Radio.
WarChant.com is the ultimate inside source for FSU football and recruiting. And now you can get in on the action for free for an entire month. WarChant.com is offering a risk-free 30-day trial subscription. Get full access to the #1 website covering the Seminoles just by entering the promo code WarChant30. That's WarChant30. Sign up and get in on the world's most active FSU message boards. Receive breaking news, stories from our award-winning staff, plus get exclusive interviews and videos. Just enter the promo code WarChant30. WarChant.com, your ultimate Seminole sports source.